At a book launch in April 2006, Kenya's most famous historian, Professor Bethwell Ogot, stood up and declared that Project Kenya was dead. The ideals that the nationalists had stood for were bankrupt. Kenya, he said, had never been more distant of an idea than it was now at the beginning of the 21st century. Nationhood no longer existed. It had been replaced by subnationalism. The different ethnic groups, in effect, had eaten up the country. These declarations were a terrible indictment on leadership in Kenya, especially since they were coming from a man who had devoted over 50 years of his life to writing Kenya into being. These are words written by the writer Paselelo Kantai in his landmark essay, The Ridiculous Generation. He is talking about the historian Bethwell Ogot. The year was 2006. He, in effect, predicted in these words what would happen a year later. Kenya would come apart at the seams, and we would lean at the brink of the precipice. I am, of course, talking about the 2007-2008 post-election violence, during which the country almost lost itself, when we almost went the civil war route, when Kenya almost shattered into pieces. My fellow Kenyans, who are we? What are we? What does it mean to be Kenyan? My name is Eric Rugara, and welcome to my State of the Nation address today. So, Kenya is a country that went through colonialism just like any other African country. Then in the year 1963, Kenya received independence. But even after Kenya had received independence, Kenya still continued, like many African countries, to have the same habits that it had had during the colonial times. In a sense, the country was free, but the people were not. The state continued to be shackled by neo-colonialism, and the people continued to be shackled by the state through draconian laws, through laws such as laws that dealt with things like freedom of association, freedom of movement, freedom of expression. There were many laws that were taken to parliament between the first years of independence, from around 1965 all the way to the 1970s, 80s. Many laws were put in place that created what came to be known as the Imperial Presidency. So Kenya became a country where people were not yet free. And people wanted to be free. People had fought against the colonial rule, which had then led to Kenya becoming free in a sense. But now the people realized that it was not yet Uhuru. And these are words by Jaramogi Oginga Odinga. So Kenya was not yet free, the people were not yet free, so the people had to continue fighting. A luta continua, bado mapambano. So then this led to what we call the Second Liberation Movement, and this culminated in the 90s, during which Kenya fought for multi-party democracy. And after we got multi-party democracy, people began to fight or to agitate for a new constitution. And the process of making this new constitution started in the year 2000 under the leadership of Professor Yash Pal Ghai. This constitution was completed by 2002. So the NAC campaign of of Kibaki, Raila Odinga and others, they campaigned saying that they would pass this constitution within the first 100 days. But this is not what happened, of course. So 100 days passed, the constitution had not yet been passed. And there was also something that happened in the union between NAK of Kibaki, Ngilu, Wamalwa Kijana versus LDP of Raila Odinga, and who else? Raila Odinga, Mudi Awori, and George Saitoti and others who had come from KANU. So NAK, led by Kibaki, betrayed LDP, leading to what they call the MOU, the betrayal, in the sense of they had written an MOU between them, sort of a power sharing MOU, and this was not followed. And this led to animosity between the people who were behind Raila Odinga and the people who were behind Mwai Kibaki. And then there was collaboration between LDP and people from KANU. So people from KANU would be people like Uhuru Kenyatta, William Ruto, the people who were angry, the MPs who were angry, displeased with the Kibaki government, with the Kibaki regime, and which included rebels of the government itself, people who felt that they had been betrayed by Kibaki. So these people joined hands with their former colleagues in KANU because they had come from KANU. So they joined hands, and this led to the government itself rejecting the constitution that was being made, and the government took that constitution and created its own version of it, which came to be known as the Kilifi draft. The original version was known as the Bomas draft? I don't remember. So these two versions were two different versions of the constitution. So in one version, the president was going to continue to be powerful, an imperial president. The same president that had been created by the draconian laws that had been passed by the Kenyatta regime in the 1960s. The same imperial presidency that had led to competition of power and resources and ethnic antagonism and assassinations such as the assassination of Tom Mboya, competing for this presidency because it had so much power. It was believed that this competition is what had led this country down a dark route. And on this other side, you had a different type of presidency where the presidency was almost ceremonial. And the president was elected by the people, while the prime minister was elected by parliament. So it was a parliamentary system. And in this system, the prime minister was going to be more powerful in terms of running the government. And the president was going to be a symbol of national unity. So this was the version of the constitution that was favored by Raila Odinga and those who followed him at that time. But the one that went to referendum was the one that favored an imperial presidency. And that was the draft or the constitution that was rejected soundly by the people. And after the rejection of this constitution, Kibaki dissolved his cabinet, or he fired all the ministers in his cabinet, and then he did not bring back the ministers who had campaigned against his version of the constitution. So the ministers and assistant ministers who had campaigned against his constitution, he did not bring them back. So Raila Odinga and almost everyone in LDP, they did not come back. So this then led to a feeling that Kibaki had betrayed all the Luo people, all the people from different communities, based on who their leaders were, who were not brought back to be cabinet ministers. So out of this feeling of betrayal, a narrative emerged, and the politicians were able to create this narrative of one tribe versus all the other tribes. And this narrative was helped or bolstered by the fact that it was felt that most of the jobs in the civil service were going to people from the president's community. So the same things that you often hear every time there's a new president, that people from his community are the ones who are getting jobs, these were also voiced at that time. And this ultimately led to the 2007 post-election violence. Then, out of this violence, there was a ceasefire later on, where both sides that had almost gone to war with each other, or in fact did go to war with each other, the leaders of these sides came together in what was known as the Government of National Unity, or the Grand Coalition Government, as it is much more popularly known. And this government, this Grand Coalition Government, was the one which now brought in commissions like the Waki Commission, the Regular Commission, and so much that was going on constitutionally, leading ultimately to the promulgation of a new constitution in 2010, August 2010. And out of this, Kenya was supposed to be a new country. There was a new spirit of new. We were a new country, we thought so. But it was not to be. We thought that with a new constitution, Kenya was going to be one. We thought that with a new constitution, we were going to solve our problems. We thought that with a new constitution, we were not going to fight each other anymore on the basis of tribe. Yet we all know that that new constitution did not necessarily lead to end of tribalism. We know that the elections that were held after that were increasingly tribal, more even than elections in the 90s, more even than those elections. So what was it that happened? Professor Mahmoud Mamdani he wrote this article where he posits, this was way back in 2013. So he wrote this article where he posited that the promulgation of the Constitution in August 2010 had effectively detribalized Kenya. So what does that mean? It means that we no longer felt that we belonged to these sub-nations. We started to feel that we belonged to one nation, that we are Kenyans. But then he says that 3 months later, or is it 4 months later? 4 months later, in December 2010, we were retribalized by the release of the Ocampo list. This Ocampo list was a list of alleged perpetrators of the post-election violence, and it had 6 names. And among these names were perceived leaders of certain communities. And this then led to leaders of these communities, or the people of these communities, feeling as if their communities were being targeted by the Ocampo list. But this did not happen organically, of course. These leaders were able to package themselves as the sacrificial lambs that were being taken to the ICC, and that it was their communities that were being targeted, that were being punished. And then that led to the awakening of the tribal feelings that had been buried by the 2010 promulgation of the Constitution. So Kenya was again retribalized. So we can see this pattern happening again 14 years later. 14 years later. So let's say a child who was 4 years old in 2010. That child was 18 years old in 2024. In 2024, I need not tell you what happened. That 18-year-old, together with other people of her or his age, they went out into the streets of Nairobi to protest against the finance bill of the year 2024. And that was the day that they breached parliament, and the members of parliament had to escape in ambulances underground. So picture that. A child who was 4 years old in the year 2010, the year that we detribalized and then retribalized. This child comes of age in 2024. And on this year of coming of age, this child joins a movement that was online, that was on Twitter, TikTok, and other social media apps. And the clarion call of this movement was leaderless, partyless, and tribeless. So the detribalization that was started by the promulgation of the Constitution in 2010 was fulfilled 14 years later in the protests of June 2024. Let's think about that. Let's sit with that. Because soon after that, the political class of this country, they tried to reverse this. They tried to retribalize Kenyans. So the question is, have they succeeded? Are we back to being members of our sub-nationalities? Am I Kenyan or am I my tribe? Are you Kenyan or are you Luo? Are you Kikuyu? Are you Kalenjin? Are you Taita? Are you Masai? What are you? So that same year, 2024, in the month of July, the government came together with the opposition led by Raila Odinga, and they effectively did what is in Kenya is called a handshake, and they formed a government together. And as soon as this had happened, the bloggers who support the ODM party, many of these bloggers began to attack members of they created a bogeyman out of the president's out of the deputy president Rigathi Gachagua. And out of creating this bogeyman, it ended up becoming more and more tribal as the days passed. But their attack on him was that he is tribal, which is true. He is an ethnic nationalist. So they attacked him on the virtue of being tribal. But then If they had stopped at attacking him, maybe it would have been okay. But they went on to create a sort of shorthand where members of his tribe are considered all to be tribal. So this effectively started to retribalize people, because if a community feels that they are being called tribal, they will start to feel that they are being targeted, which then brings in a siege mentality. Then, in the month of November 2024, same year, he was impeached. Rigathi Gachagua was impeached, and that impeachment was the masterstroke, because after this impeachment, he was able to marshal together his community and make them feel that they were part of his persecution, that they were part and parcel of what he was going through, and that when he was being accused of being tribal, that this accusation was being put upon all of them. And then this led to the clarion call of Wantam, which then led to the retribalization. And then after the clarion call of Wantam, the government came up with their own clarion call, Tutam. But my argument is there is no big difference between these two ideologies, Wantam, Tutam. Why do I say this? I say this because June 2024 was not about Wantam. June 2024 was bigger than Wantam. June 2024 was about the Kenya we want. I listened to the Twitter spaces that were going on that year, that time, that month. And one of the things that the youth, that we were saying, that people were saying was, we want to live in a country that affords us dignity. Young Kenyans in the diaspora were saying, we want to live in a country that we don't want to live abroad, we want to come back home. We want to come back and build our country. Kenyans in Kenya, young Kenyans were saying, we want to live in a country where when we leave the country, we are traveling. We are not trying to go to find a place to survive. So they were saying, we don't want to go to the Middle East to be slaves anymore in the 21st century. We don't want to be 21st century slaves. They were saying, we don't want to live in a country where during election seasons, some of us have to travel, some of us have to leave our homes, some of us have to leave where we live because we are afraid. We are afraid because in past election cycles, we have suffered violence, we have suffered threats, leaflets. So they said, we are partyless, we are tribeless, we are leaderless. So the clarion call was not Wantam. The clarion call was, we are one. It doesn't matter who is leading. It doesn't matter who is the kingpin. It doesn't matter what party, political party you belong to. It doesn't matter what tribe you belong to. We are one. We are Kenyan. So effectively, what these very young people were able to do in 2024 was to bring back a vision of Project Kenya. In 2006, I started with a quotation from Bethwell Ogot's essay, The Ridiculous Generation. In this essay, Bethwell quotes something said by Professor Bethwell Ogot, that Project Kenya was dead. And indeed it seems it was so, because A year later, Kenya descended into the madness of the post-election violence. So Project Kenya was certainly dead at that time. In 2017, 2016, David Ndii, the current economic advisor to the president, he wrote a very potent newspaper article in the Nation with the title, Kenya is a Cruel Marriage. Let's Talk Divorce. So that was in 2016. And in 2017, after the disputed election, I remember a map came up and there were talks of secession at that time. Of course, this was just politics, but at the time it felt real to me. So Kenya has been on the verge of breaking at different times. But the young people in June 2024, they give us hope. They gave us hope. They said Kenya is one. They said Kenya ni home. They said huku ni kwetu, hatutoki huku, and we are going to build this country. So that means that the political class had been identified as the biggest threat to this country's unity. This is why they said we are leaderless. And in that leaderlessness, in that sense of unity, Kenyans, young Kenyans, they went to parliament where the leaders go, where the leaders congregate. They went to that house and they said, this is our house. So do not think that just because we've elected you and you come to this house, that this is your house. No, this is our house. And they quoted the Constitution. They said, the people shall. All power, all sovereign power is vested in the people. So in this, you can see that June 2024 was a sort of threshold. There is Kenya before June 2024 and there is Kenya today. The politics that are being practiced in Kenya today, they may have a semblance to politics of the past, but we are not there. We are no longer where we were in 2022. We are no longer where we were in 2017, in 2013, and in the years past. Kenya has changed. And this change is internal. This change is in our mindset. It is in our consciousness. The month-long protests that happened in June 2024 and in July 2024, and even in 2025 month of, I think, July and June, this series of protests, including the 2023 protests by Raila Odinga, maandamano, when people used to put sufurias on their heads. So these cycles of protests in those 3 years, and even this year we have had protests za watu wa matatu, those sorts of protests. So these protests, they have changed our collective consciousness. We are not who we used to be. It used to be that when Kenyans had an issue, they would rely on activists. They would rely on Okia Omtata. They would rely on Boniface Mwangi to do something. Kenyans would tweet. Kenyans would write. Do something. And unless these activists did something, Kenyans never felt they could do anything. But we are now in a country where Kenyans have the courage to protest against the American government bringing an Ebola facility. And these are not Kenyans in Nairobi, these are Kenyans in Nanyuki. These are Kenyans somewhere in Western Kenya. So Kenyans everywhere have now had the power to protest, the power to picket, the power to tell the state and to tell anybody what they want directly. Kenyans did not seem to have this power before. The people who seem to have this power were students in Nairobi. But since June 2024, protests have become part of the language of this country. We have become almost like France. We have become like France. And you know when France or the French learned the language of protest? It was during the French Revolution. So you can see that 300 years, almost 300 years later, the French are still inspired by their revolution. The spirit of protest is now in their DNA. And I believe this is going to be the same case for Kenya. The spirit of protest, the spirit of resistance is now part of the DNA of Kenyans. And the political class may think that they have succeeded in retribalizing us, in retribalizing this country, but they have not. There is a very good reason why the generation today, the young generation today, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, there's a good reason why they are able to detribalize at this level. Is because of, first of all, rural-urban migration. Rural-urban migration has led to a lot of people living in the urban areas. And in these urban areas, people tend to become more cosmopolitan. We tend to speak Kiswahili, and in these urban areas, young people have developed their own language called Sheng. So there is a saying that says politics is downstream of culture. That means that whatever is happening in the culture, if you look at that, you can be able to know what is going to happen in politics tomorrow by seeing what is happening in culture today. Let me give you an example. There's a song that was popular back in 2024, I think, Mapangale. This is a song that promotes violence, right? What happened a year later? Goons. Goons are now part of our political culture. Isn't that Mapangale? And that also provides a very dangerous and eerie prediction of how elections can go in Kenya right now. Mapangale. Mapangale is the culture right now. So what is in the politics downstream? You get my drift? So because of that, if you look at the culture of Kenya today, the culture of urban Kenya, the culture that a lot of young people in their 20s, in their teenage years, the culture that they relate to is not their traditional cultures. So a lot of young people can't speak Kikuyu, they can't speak Kijaluo, they can't speak their mother tongues. And what that means is that these people are not really Kikuyu, they are not really Luo, they are not really Kalenjin, they are not really Kamba, they are not really Giriama, they are not really Maasai. The only language they speak is Kiswahili and they speak Sheng. And these two languages are the languages of Kenya, which means that their tribe is Kenya. It is not that they are tribeless. It is that their tribe is Kenya. They are nationalists, which means their tribalism is more likely to be xenophobia than tribalism. So these young people today are more likely to be xenophobic, like South Africans, than to be tribal against fellow Kenyans. You get me? And this is happening also because Kenya is becoming cosmopolitan. Kenya is becoming extremely open in terms of who can come into Kenya, which means Kenya contains many nationalities and they are growing. So we have Burundians, we have Rwandans, we have Congolese, we have people from Somalia. So we have all these people in Kenya. And what will happen as the number of people from other countries continues to grow in Kenya? The young people today, the young people who you see protesting against the finance bill, the young people who are protesting against the government of Kenya, the young people who say they are tribeless. These young people will become like South Africa at some point, but that's getting ahead of us. So that's the other side of patriotism, it's xenophobia. So people who are patriotic can be nationalistic on a negative level, because loving their country can also mean fighting other countries. And this is something that you see in how young people react online when Kenya is mentioned poorly by anybody. Kenyans react as a horde. They come together as cancel culture and they attack. And we are known for this. We are rabid on social media. We are rabid when it comes to protecting our Kenyanhood. So that Kenyan identity is now sacrosanct. It is now who we are. We are not different tribes, we are Kenyans. We are detribalized. And that brings me to the politics of 2027 or 2026, which is where we are right now. So we have seen there are three distinct movements right now. I will name them. The first one is Wantam. The second one is Tutam. The third one is Sifuna. These are three distinct movements, and they mean three distinct things. Wantam is a rejection of the current regime. Wantam is a child of Tutam. In fact, Wantam is effectively Tutam wearing another face. So there is actually nothing truly distinct between these two. The only difference is that the Wantam movement is about removing this kingpin and replacing him with another kingpin. So it is not about ideas, it is not about ideology, it is not about the Kenya we want, it is about get rid of this person, put this other person, let's continue eating. So it is still it is still not what people fought for. It is still not what people idealized when they said they are leaderless, they are tribeless, they are partyless. Then the other movement is Sifuna. So Sifuna is the most interesting among these. Okay, let's say Tutam. Tutam is, of course, the continuation of the status quo. So Wantam is a fake messiah. Wantam is a fake revolution. It's a fake destabilization. So Wantam says tuangushe, anguka nayo, fagia wote. But actually, what you see is in Wantam is the recycling of old leaders, old faces, corrupt, tribal, the same old thing. So with Wantam, you don't get a new Kenya, you get a continuation of what we've been having. With Tutam, you get an intensification of what we are having. Then there is Sifuna. And when I say Sifuna, I am not referring to the leaders around the movement. The movement is actually likely to be hijacked. And that has already started. So this movement or this Sifuna has an ideology which seems to be similar to what the young people stated in June 2024. They are leaderless, they are tribeless, they are partyless. So, and that is why this third movement seems to attract the most number of young people today. And you can draw this directly also to, you can draw an inference to the Wajakoya movement of 2022. So the same young people Actually, I believe that the first incarnation of what the Gen Z protests would be, the first formation of that movement starts with the Wajakoya campaign. Because the very same type of campaign that happened for Wajakoya is the same campaign that we saw online for the Reject Finance Bill protests. We can cite what this type of campaign looks like. It is online, it is volunteership, it is creative, people making their own posters, making their own graphics, people volunteering, people being very creative. So that kind of energy, that collective energy is the same thing we saw in June 2024. And it is that same kind of energy that we are seeing in young people when they say Sisi ni Sifuna. But Sisi ni Sifuna is interesting, it's complicated because it also contains Raila Odinga's energy. Because Sifuna is the protege of Raila Odinga, and he seems to be the heir of his ideals and of what he stood for in ODM. So the constitutionalism that Raila Odinga represented is seen in Sifuna. So you find that his political messaging is mainly about the Constitution. So out of this, he is able to appeal to Raila Odinga followers and to the Kenyan youth, because this is the thing that these two groups share in common. They are pro-constitutionalism. So the young people in June 2024, they used to quote the Constitution. They used to talk about the preamble of the Constitution, which says sovereign power is vested in the people of Kenya, and it is donated, it is given to the political class by the people. It is vested in the people. And it says the people shall, the people have the power, the people can reclaim their power. So this constitutionalism, we see it in Sifuna. But if you're following closely, there is an attempt to sort of also tribalize the movement. So for him to lock his political base back in his backyard, and for political leaders from his region to back him and to make him their tribal kingpin. So these are hurdles that the Sisi ni Sifuna movement will have to surmount. These are hurdles it will have to surmount. It will have to surmount the hurdle of retribalization. He cannot afford to be a tribal kingpin, yet at the same time, he cannot afford to reject the people from his tribe who are trying to build around him. But at the same time, he cannot afford to allow his movement to be full of the same old faces, because that then punctures the energy. But at the same time, if he does not have the solid ground of the perceived leaders, he may not have the direct fighting chance to actually win. It would end up making him a third horse, because we've seen third horse candidates. We've seen Wajakoya, we've seen Kuru Aukot, we have seen people like Peter Kenneth, we've seen different candidates who have been third force, third wave, So where does that leave Kenyans? Where does that leave the youth? Where does that leave the people who said we are tribeless, we are partyless, we are leaderless? Does it mean that this next election, What does it mean for us? I don't know what will happen in 2027. I don't know if the election will be peaceful. I don't know who will win. I don't know if the president will come back. I don't know if the united opposition will be united. I don't know if the youth will have an appropriate candidate. I don't know if the young people will have a reason to vote. My eyes don't see that close. My eyes see further. It is clearer to look at 2032, 2040 than it is to look at 2027. The reason for that is because the demographics may not yet be where we want them to be. So in 2032, millions of young people will have come of age. Between 2032 and 2024 is 8 years. In 8 years, how many young people have come of age? Millions. Each year alone could be 1 million or 2 million young people. Around maybe 1 million young people or more coming of age each year. So if we assume 1 million young people come of age every year, by 2032, we will have had 8 million young people who have come of age since 2024. I am guessing. The people who voted in 2022, it was about 15 million. 7 million voted for one candidate. 200,000 less voted for the runners up. Yeah. So between Raila Odinga and William Ruto, it was about 14 million people. So think about that. 8 million new people, including the millions that are already young today. So think about generation Gen Z and generation Alpha, and the one that those two actually. So these two generations will be the majority, together with the millennials, right? So these two generations are going to have a lot of votes in 2032. And they are going to be very proactive based on how they have been moving since 2024, right? So that tells you that 2032, it will be impossible for the political class to move the way they have always been moving. It will be impossible even for anybody to be a dictator the way they want to. It will be impossible to impose on the people at that point. No matter how strong you are, no matter how much power you have, because these are millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of people, and you cannot fight those kinds of demographics. You cannot fight political consciousness that has gone mainstream at that level. That is conscientization that has happened at the large scale. So this is the biggest nightmare for any leader. Having millions of people who have woken up, millions of people who cannot be controlled. So it is not that leaders are that strong as we think. Leaders have their strength. The strength of leaders is based on the capacity of people to be misled, to be manipulated, to be controlled mentally. For the leader to be able to control a large territory, he must control the minds of the people. So when you have these millions of young people who have unshackled themselves mentally through the internet, through talking to each other, through having their own culture, which is different. So if the leader is talking about sisi watu ya Murima, sisi watu ya sijui wapi, this is a language that is not familiar to these young people who speak Kiswahili, who speak Shen, who do not speak their mother tongue. Therefore, these young people are Kenyans, and the language they speak is not the language that the leaders speak. Therefore, these leaders will have a very hard time manipulating these people. And therefore, I have a lot of confidence that 5 years from now, 10 years from now, Kenya will be different. It must, because it's demographics, and demographics is destiny. I am your host, Eric Rugara. This is my show, Commentaries, which is hosted on this channel, Roaring Simba Network. Please remember to subscribe to the channel. This is a new channel. Our old channel was hacked. So please subscribe to the channel. Please leave a comment. Please share this post, this video. Please tell us what you think. Please tell us what you want us to talk about next time. And until next time.